Hey everyone, it's Tuesday, September 18th, and I thought I would finally go ahead and make that video I said I wanted to make way back in the beginning. Just giving you a little bit of my history, how I was diagnosed, the medications I've been on, and kind of what has led to the point of me deciding to have my colectomy last week. So first of all, I was diagnosed in 1995 while I was in school, in college. And I had gone to a crayfish boil. One of my friends knew someone who had some crayfish shipped in from Louisiana or something, and it was a big party, and you boil it and break it open, sort of like shrimp, and eat it. And later that night or the next day, I don't really remember, I started having diarrhea a lot, and then it just kept going on. It went on for about a week. By the time I got to the doctor and they decided to do a stool culture, they found out I did have some type of bacteria related to the crayfish, most likely. They started me on some meds for that, and while the bacteria cleared up, the diarrhea didn't clear up. So this was in June of 95. By July, I was still having a lot of diarrhea and things, and I think it was by August that I had finally got to a gastroenterologist, where they finally did colonoscopy and diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis. Just one second, I'm going to turn the music down a little bit. So they had diagnosed me with ulcerative colitis. Started me on a course of prednisone at that time, as well as some steroid enemas, and then another medication called Acecol at the time. Now keep in mind, I was in college, so I was sharing an apartment with, I think it was 3 or 4 other guys at the time. So in the evenings, I would have to go into the bathroom and lay on the floor and use these enemas. I was 22 at the time, I think. So this was like, 22-year-old guy living with guys, having to go in the bathroom, lay on the floor, put an enema up your butt. It was a whole weird concept. But of course, I hadn't been eating and I'd been having a lot of diarrhea, so you're doing whatever you can. And I remember when I was diagnosed, it really, ulcerative colitis, okay, great, give me some medicine, I'll have to be on it the rest of my life, okay, that's fine, that's what I'll do. I mean, that's how I looked at the disease, so it didn't seem that big of a deal. I didn't do much research on it that I remember, just figured, okay, get the medicines and you'll be on your way. So by September, I think things had started to turn around. I had lost almost 30 pounds from the initial symptoms in June through September. And I got down, I think, to in the 180s, and I'm 6'3", so that's pretty thin for me. But then things turned around, and I was fine. I was able to wean off the steroids, I could stop the enemas, and I was just on the drug called Acecol. And looking back on it, I don't remember much of anything happening other than the Acecol was working. I think I was taking 6 pills a day, 2 pills 3 times a day. And at least in my mind, it looks like that went on well for years. And then I think I started having some more symptoms on and off, and I would jump on low doses of the prednisone and get off, and then finally came to the point where we thought the Acecol wasn't working at all, so they switched me over to another drug called Colizal, which is very similar to Acecol. And that seemed to work for a few years. I'm going to I wrote a bunch of things down so I didn't forget what to talk about here. So we did Colizal, and then that seemed to work, but it didn't work for as long as the Acecol did. So then I tried another drug called methotrexate, which can be pretty toxic, so I had to have my liver enzymes checked frequently. And I started to develop a slight case of pancreatitis, but I think we caught it early enough that I was able to stop the medicine and move on to another drug. So then in 2000 and I started in January of 2007, I started Remicade. My GI thought, let's try to give Remicade a shot, nothing else seems to be working. And keep in mind, up to this point I had been on and off little doses of prednisone, probably nothing more than 40 mg at that point. So in January of 2007 I started the standard dose of Remicade. It's what they call a biologic drug, so it was relatively new at the time. It had been approved for Crohn's, and then they had just approved it for colitis too. Lots of potential side effects. I've read of some people that have had very bad side effects from the Remicade. And Remicade is an infusion drug, which means you have to go down to an outpatient center and sit for a couple hours with an IV in your arm while this drug infuses into your system. And usually go every 6, every 8, every 10, every 12 weeks. It depends on your doctor and your symptoms and things like that. So I started that in January of 2007. And I was also on prednisone in 2007 at the same time. And trying to wean down the prednisone, I'd get to the bottom and then I'd flare up again and go back on the prednisone. The Remicade didn't seem to be working, so by May, my GI recommended increasing the Remicade to a double dose of Remicade every time I went in. So again, at this point I'm like, whatever, if medication's gonna work, let's make it work. So in about May of 2007, I'm on a double dose of Remicade, still trying to come off of the steroids, but as I'm looking here, even in July, I was still at 30 mg of the steroids. By August of 2007, I had dropped down to 15. And at this point, my GI was talking about surgery, you should look into it. So in September of 2007, I did meet with the surgeon, and it was actually the same surgeon who did this procedure. So that was in 2007 was my first meeting with him. He just discussed what the options were at that time and how surgery worked and things. So I went ahead and I just made a surgery date at that point for a colectomy. So that would have been the surgery would have been for February of 2008. So then we get into December of 2007 still. And by the end of December 2007, I was able to get off of the steroids, and it seemed that the double doses of Remicade were working. So I canceled the colectomy appointment in February, and for all of 2008, all I did was do Remicade every probably 8 weeks on average. I wasn't on any prednisone, I didn't have any flares. 2008 was a great year as far as medications go. Then in 2009, that summer, my GI noticed my liver enzymes were elevated. They do doing blood work every 6 weeks. So at that point, we monitored the liver enzymes for a little bit more, and then they decided to do a liver biopsy to find out exactly what was going on, because there's a secondary diagnosis called Primary Sclerosing Cholangitis, or PSC, that 4% or about 4% of patients who have ulcerative colitis can develop PSC. So anyways, I ended up going through a liver biopsy. It was a confirmation of the PSC diagnosis. I ended up going to Mayo Clinic in 2009 also for a second opinion, met with a physician there by the name of Keith Lindor, who's kind of one of the gurus of PSC. He confirmed the diagnosis, he did a liver MRI, but the good news was everything was pretty stable with that. I wasn't having any symptoms. The effects in my bile ducts were very minimal, so we were just kind of gonna monitor it every year with ultrasounds or liver MRIs, things like that. By the fall of 2009, I started having flares again with the colitis. So I'm on double doses of Remicade. Then I went back on prednisone. I started in October of 2009 on 40 mg of prednisone, and basically played with prednisone through the rest of 2009, all of 2010, all of 2011. And in 2011, I was able, by the fall, I think Labor Day, to get off of prednisone completely. So I thought, great, maybe I'm back to just Remicade getting me through. But by November of 2011, I was flaring again, so I went back in to see my GI, and he actually recommended a drug called budesonide, which is a drug I believe to normally treat Crohn's, but they've had some success in colitis with it. And it's still a steroid, but it's a milder steroid because I guess about 90% of the systemic side effects are cleared through your system as the first, as your blood passes through the liver, and the first clearing, I guess is what they call it. But I figured, hey, let's try it. I'd been on prednisone, didn't like the side effects. So in November of 2011, I started the budesonide. So I was on budesonide and Remicade. And then in December of 2011, I started noticing my skin was just really getting bad. I had had small cases of dermatitis in the past, which you can have with colitis. But it just got really bad. So I went to the dermatologist and of course got some creams and things, and they diagnosed it as SIBO psoriasis or eczema, that kind of stuff. Then in February, I decided, January I think, I thought I'm going to look into surgery again. So I met with the surgeon again just to go over things again in case. And he had said, you know, you're the one that's going to say when you need to have surgery, if you need to have it. So I decided to start what's called the specific carbohydrate diet in February of 2012. And you can look it up online. It's just a different way of eating, kind of making your own foods, lots of vegetables, lots of protein, cutting out most carbs, sugars, processed foods, that sort of stuff. So things sort of went well with that for about a month, but I think the budesonide was also helping. And then in March, I kind of noticed the budesonide didn't seem to be helping as much. And then I started to notice some boils on my skin, and went to the derm and found out it was a skin infection that I had to have actually lanced and drained. I was on antibiotics for that. Then after that cleared up, infection came back again. Went on another round of antibiotics. Then in June of 2012, developed the same infection again on my skin. Went to an infectious disease doctor, put me on a different antibiotic, and also had me start these Hibiclens washes every day for 3 days each month, along with this ointment to put in my nose and things like that, in the hopes to kill this bacteria that I had. And so at that point, I just decided I'm stopping the budesonide because I was pretty sure I figured out it was sort of an allergic reaction. All my skin issues were an allergic reaction to the budesonide. So I stopped that. I stopped the Remicade, of course, because I had the skin infection. And then I just went ahead and said, enough is enough. It's been 17 years with this. These medications aren't working. I'm having side effects from stuff. I'm getting infections. It's really interfering with my life, and the colitis really wasn't under control. So I had made the appointment back in July, I think. I scheduled my colectomy for September 10th, which has obviously passed. And that's kind of what led me here, what led down this road. I also wanted to touch a little bit just about costs of things, and I know your life is not really measured in cost, but I just kind of wanted to put a number on there. In 2011, I spent $750 that year on just medications. That's over-the-counter stuff that I get from Walgreens or CVS or whatever. That's not counting the Remicade infusions. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Remicade, wait till you hear these numbers. I was on a double dose of Remicade, and my insurance was billed from the hospital $36,000, about $36,000 per visit for a double dose of Remicade. So I was getting 5 to 7 visits or 5 to 7 treatments of Remicade a year. So when you total that up, that's between $180,000 to $252,000 a year that my insurance was paying for my Remicade treatments, which really maybe worked for a year or so. And again, there's discounted rates between my insurance company and the hospital, and so they didn't end up paying that much. I think they ended up paying half that much, but still, just a ton of money spent on medications that really weren't doing a whole lot. So I'm gonna, in a second, I just cleaned out my closet, and I have all the medications that I currently have sitting on the table here that I've had to take because of the colitis or a side effect of a med from the colitis, and I just kind of wanted to give you a visual of what that all entails. So you can see all these bottles. These are all enemas that you would have to lay down and put up your butt, basically, and then lay on your side for about 30 minutes every night, and try to hold it in all night. There's of course Miralax in the back, which is all the prep for all the colonoscopies. There's Wound Wash and Hibit Cleanse for the infections that I got. There's various ointments there for the skin. That top one right here is the one that I had to put in my nose. And then these two, of course, are prednisone. And this is another rectal medication. It's a foam, and you use this syringe to inject it. So it's just, when I look back on everything and I see it all sitting out like this, it's just pretty amazing that we go through all of this trying to manage this disease and live around the disease. One of my nurses said we really become masters at living around it, and we don't really realize what we're doing. We're just trying to live life. So like I said, I just wanted to share my story with you so people knew how I was diagnosed and what led to this point. Thus far, my liver diagnosis, the PSC, I just had another liver MRI, and things are still going good. It really hasn't progressed. I don't know if it will or not. It can be a slow progressing thing, and there's really nothing they can do for it. You just deal with symptoms if you start to develop them as they come along. Worst case scenario down the road is that I could end up needing a liver transplant, or you also have the increased risk of liver cancer. So those thoughts are in the back of my head, although I'm not really concerned about it because there really is nothing I can do about it. It's just kind of in the universe's hands, and I can only do what I can do. And so I'm glad, thoroughly glad that I had this colectomy done. At least that's one thing that I've managed and controlled and is taken care of. And I don't have to worry about a risk of colon cancer, so I feel like that's one thing that I know I took control and charge of what I could. So I'll keep you guys posted. The videos might be a little less frequent now unless I encounter some certain thing with the bag. I've shown you how I change it. I've given you my history. You've seen probably the most aggressive part of things was the surgery and the recovery thus far, so I'll probably start to decrease the frequency of the videos a little bit, just to give you updates on how things are going. So don't forget, if you guys have any questions and you want to email me, it's ucandpsc@gmail.com, or you can leave comments and questions below the video. Talk to you next time.